The American dictionary is the word anagram, which is the intentional scrambling of the letters of a word to conceal the real word. So if you re-scramble, you get Masons. This is how we know that the Masons originated the drawings for the Great Seal of the United States.
This search for concealed meanings in the iconography is not confined to the imagery alone. It is claimed that the number 13, the most ominous number in Western tradition, is hidden throughout the symbols on the $1 bill.
The Masons in 1960 issued an article inside the New Age magazine in which they identify the number 13 and the numbers of different symbols connecting itself to 13 as being Masonic.
They point out the repetition of the symbolic number 13. There are 13 leaves on the olive branch in the eagle's right claw, 13 arrows in the left claw, 13 stars above the eagle's head, and 13 bars and stripes on the shield.
To all secret societies, the number 13 is enormously important symbolically. The number 13 symbolizes rebirth, regeneration, and when you're birthing something, when you're bringing something into formation, it's never easy. So the number 13 can symbolize not just rebirth and regeneration, but death. Death of the old and the birth of the new.
So there's an intentional concealing of the number 13 as being a Masonic number on the back of our dollar bill.
13 is regarded as an unlucky number in many cultures, but according to the conspiracy theorists, in this instance, it has even more sinister implications.
The number 13 represents the number of Satan, the devil. And I think that's why the Masons revere the number 13. And that opens up a whole can of worms.
They are convinced there are other numbers embedded in the design of the Great Seal that have special significance in Freemasonry.
On the eagle side of the Great Seal of the United States, if you count the feathers, you'll notice that there are 32 feathers on the bird's left wing and 33 on his right wing.
This is understood to refer to the 33 degrees of Masonry introduced by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, America's most prominent Masonic order, whose national HQ is in Washington.
The 33rd Degree Council that meets in Washington, D.C. claims in their own literature to be the mother jurisdiction of the world, the mother council of the world. Manly P. Hall called them the most powerful organization in the land, that they ordain kings and shape the destinies of worlds. That's called power.
It's suggested that there is one final piece of information on the dollar bill that proves a Masonic plot. Above the eye, at the apex of the pyramid, there is the Latin inscription Annuit Coeptis, which is loosely translated as, "Providence has favored our undertakings." But the Masonic conspiracy theorists claim that when it is combined with the lower inscription, a dark intention is unveiled.
America's secret destiny is involved in the Latin phrases Annuit Septis Novus Ordo Seclorum, announcing the birth of the New World Order, and that's what their goal is. The New World Order will be worldwide when it's instituted in the near future.
A new world order that abolishes the partnership of government and church as we know it. This is in stark contrast to the inscription above the number 1 on the dollar bill, "In God We Trust."
It's going to be a new civilization. We're not going to live the way we're living now.
It is predicted that this new world order will be a global phenomenon, superseding all national boundaries and ignoring the ownership of property. All traditional religions will be replaced by a new belief system dictated by the Masonic orders.
The theory goes that these groups of people are intent on, in effect, ruling the world, and that this is inherent in the Founding Fathers and what they do with the Great Seal. And the symbols upon the Great Seal are intended to show us this, to show the way. It's an enlightenment, but only again for those who have eyes to see.
The evidence for hidden and possibly sinister meanings in the symbolism of the dollar bill appears to be mounting. How can historians, and especially Masonic historians, possibly explain all this evidence away? On the evidence of the story so far, the suggestion that the American $1 bill conceals hidden messages seems plausible. They were supposedly inserted by a small sect of Masons who had a hand in creating first the Great Seal and later the design of the dollar bill. Freemasons themselves find the whole idea of an elaborate conspiracy completely preposterous.
You can also believe that Jews or Catholics or Muslims or Protestants are out to take over the world and force everyone to have their religion. And I don't believe that's true. So if anyone cares to think that the Freemasons are out there to serve themselves and themselves alone, I can't stop them, but I don't believe it.
The establishment for the last 2,000 years has been a Christian establishment in the Western world. It's been an establishment where the church and state have been very closely interacting. And anything that comes against that norm, and claims an earlier heritage or more sacred ideals or symbols that mean deeper things than the whole of the Christian heritage, I think that's the problem. And it strikes fear into the hearts of the establishment.
Perhaps the Freemasons have become victims of their own secrecy. Mysteriousness has only served to fuel suspicion and fear of the unknown in the public mind.
People don't like to have symbols that they don't understand, and also that they think might be concealing important information from them. That's why I think Freemasonry has many enemies.
But what of the symbolism? Freemasons argue that much of the evidence to support Masonic influence in government just doesn't stand up. For example, conspiracy theorists have claimed that almost all the men who signed the Declaration of Independence were Masons, but there is no solid evidence to underpin this claim.
56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. 9 of them can be verified to be Freemasons. And when I say they can be verified, we have actual records of them having attended a lodge, or we have a membership certificate. For the Constitution, there were 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention in Pennsylvania. 39 of the delegates signed the Constitution of the United States. 11 of those 39 can be verified to be Freemasons.
It is maintained that Benjamin Franklin was the only Freemason on the committees that designed the Great Seal, with the possible exception of the artist Francis Hopkinson.
It's often claimed that Thomas Jefferson was a Freemason. The best evidence that they can offer is that the Freemasons marched in his funeral procession. Of course, every civic organization in the state of Virginia and every civic organization that could travel there marched in his funeral procession, so that's not surprising. Modern scholars have looked at the record, and it's completely lacking. When you look for the hard evidence, there is nothing there. Jefferson was not a Mason.
And although Benjamin Franklin certainly was a Mason, he was not instrumental in promoting the visual and symbolic elements of the seal. That was the responsibility of the artistic advisors the committees employed to develop the design.
Well, if you look carefully at the committees who helped design it, you find that there were no Freemasons that actually added to the design of the Great Seal of the United States.
If it was the artistic advisors that chose the images, it's possible that their inspiration had nothing to do with the Freemasons.
Graphic symbolism is as important in the 18th century as it is now in the 21st century. So there was a standardized visual language which stood across Europe and, of course, the United States.
At a time when many people couldn't read, this common visual language was taught through the use of emblem books.
Emblem books became standard pattern books for engravers, architects, engineers. So by the time you get to the early 18th century, Ripper's emblem book was the standard piece of design equipment that you'd find in any engraver's workshop.
Emblem books contain stories of moral instruction presented through the use of symbols and verse. Children were brought up to understand the meanings of the symbols even if they couldn't read.
It was a code that you didn't have to break, that you were brought up with. So if you saw a particular sort of graphic symbol, you made certain sort of associations with it.
It is suggested that the Egyptian imagery used on the Great Seal was part of this common visual code, rather than being specifically Masonic in origin.
Some of the elements, the all-seeing eye and the unfinished pyramid, have been used as Masonic symbols over the years, but they have also been used outside of Freemasonry. So in that sense, it's a use of common heraldic images.
There was certainly a theory that Freemasonry originated in the mystery religions of Egypt and the Mediterranean. There is no historical evidence to support that. Certainly, Masonic lodges have used pyramids as a decorative motif, but none are officially adopted as symbols.
And as for the all-seeing eye, Freemasons accept its significance, but suggest it was a popular logo of the time.
The all-seeing eye has been a symbol that has been used traditionally to express the deity.
So if you were looking for a compact way to represent God, then the eye is small, it's compact, and it lends itself to very impressive artistic renderings.
According to this interpretation, the Founding Fathers were implying that God was looking over America and favoring and protecting America.
The pyramid signifies strength and duration. The eye over it and the motto allude to the many signal interpositions of providence in favor of the American cause.
The question of the eagle is also less straightforward than the conspiracy theorists suppose. Benjamin Franklin, the Masonic master, was in fact opposed to using the emblem of the eagle, preferring, as he wrote to his daughter, the wild turkey.
I wish the bald eagle had not been chosen as the representative of our country. He is a bird of bad moral character. The turkey is, in comparison, a much more respectable bird. He is besides, though a little vain and silly, a bird of courage.
Benjamin Franklin wanted to use a wild turkey because it was a very wily, tricky bird that was very smart. The eagle, on the other hand, is a carrion eater, and he didn't think it was very noble. But the bald-headed eagle is a beautifully impressive bird. For better or worse, the United States rejected Ben Franklin's turkey and accepted the eagle as a symbol of power and majesty for the United States.
So an innocent explanation for the eagle appears true. Even the sinister recurrence of the number 13 can be disputed.
The number 13 appears time and time again in the symbolism of the dollar bill. If you are profoundly paranoid in your conspiracy theories, this is because the Freemasons think the number 13 is important. And of course, there's the simpler explanation that there were 13 colonies. Number 13 has no significance to Masons.
The official explanation reads like this. The 13 stripes on the shield represent the 13 original states. The motto, E pluribus unum, from many one, alludes to the union of these states. The olive branch and the 13 arrows denote the power of peace and war which is exclusively vested in Congress. The constellation of stars above the eagle denotes a new state taking its place and rank among other sovereign powers. So Freemasons argue that all the symbolic elements on the dollar bill would have been common currency at the time the Great Seal was designed. And more importantly, they dismiss out of hand any notion of a plot to establish a new world order.
The motto on the Great Seal of the United States is Novus Ordo Seclorum. It comes, I believe, from Virgil. It means a new order of the ages. It does not mean a new secular order. There is no new world order or new order of the ages in Freemasonry. It's not used, it doesn't appear, and any other translation than the new order of the ages shows an abysmal ignorance of Latin.
The Latin might have had much more to do with mundane politics than with arcane messages. The Founding Fathers were referring to the birth of their new nation with its radical form of government.
Novus Order Seclorum means basically the new order of the ages. What is the new order? The new order is a republican form of government, not a political party republican, but a representative form of government. America was not set up to be a democracy. America was set up to be a republic, and a republic means a representative form of government.
Despite attempts to downplay the influence of Freemasonry, there does seem to be substantial ambiguity about the dollar bill for which Masonic imagery could offer a plausible explanation. And the success of the film National Treasure suggests a public willingness to see hidden meanings in the mundane. And there is one last, perhaps clinching piece of evidence. It involves a mysterious guru. The original inspiration for the beguiling symbolism of the Great Seal remains controversial. Just how closely the Freemasons were actually involved in its creation is debatable. But one thing is certain. The symbolism of the seal was only transferred to the dollar bill in 1935, and the man responsible was the President of the United States, who was also a Freemason.
The Great Seal's placement on the dollar bill is quite an extraordinary story.
Secretary of Agriculture Henry A. Wallace, later Vice President Wallace, has taken credit for a suggestion that led to putting the Great Seal on the back of the $1 bill.
Henry Wallace was a Mason of high rank. He also had a lifelong interest in mysticism and the occult. He came across a book about the history of the Great Seal and was struck by the image on the reverse, which he had never seen before.
He saw this pyramid in the eye in a triangle, and since he was a student of symbolism, and he had a guru, he had a teacher who pointed at the symbolism as being enormously important for the United States of America, and also he was a Freemason.
The guru, or teacher, was a strange character called Nicholas Rurik.
Nicholas Rurik was a Russian mystic and an artist. And he traveled widely, especially in the 20s, to various nations that he felt that Lord Jesus Christ traveled in. His interest was making contact with Christ and trying to determine when Christ was going to return.
Rurik lived in New York for a period in the 1920s, and it was during that time that he met Wallace.
I think he had extraordinary influence over Wallace. Rurik, when you look at his paintings, you begin to understand this guy was a multiple genius. To be just around a person like that has to affect your consciousness and help you see meanings for things.
There was a great deal of public disapproval of this relationship, and in later years Wallace was ridiculed when letters he wrote to Rurik referring to him as guru were made public.
This became very embarrassing later on to FDR and Henry Wallace because they were trying to say basically that Nicholas Rurik also served as a spy and was a communist. Rurik, strangely enough, after he inspired Wallace, who inspired FDR, finally gets to the point where he is no longer welcome because of his spiritual beliefs.
But through Rurik's instruction, Wallace came to understand the importance of symbolism as a means of communication, and as a Freemason, he was struck by the powerful image of the pyramid with the all-seeing eye above it.
It is possible that Franklin and Wallace, as Freemasons, were familiar with the all-seeing eye as a symbol of God because they had looked at Renaissance drawings or paintings where it's used.
But the conspiracy theorists think that there's much more to it than that.
The Masons have to conceal their hidden agenda, their secret agenda for the United States. And so they offer the explanation that it was available in books of symbolism, that people were aware of these, and that's where they come from. And I don't believe that's true at all.
But beyond the familiar all-seeing eye, Wallace saw in one of the mottos a reflection of his president's administration.
Henry Wallace felt it was of some value that the Novus Ordo Seclorum meant the new order of the ages, meaning the New Deal. And so he went to President Roosevelt and asked that they adopt it.
The banks closed. President Roosevelt taking financial measures against the Depression. Social Security founded as he instituted a series of New Deal reforms.
The New Deal was the title given to a series of programs introduced by President Roosevelt during the Great Depression, with the aim of social reform and the stimulation of economic recovery.
And confidence is growing on every side.
Wallace saw the meaning of it, could easily interpret it because he was a member of a secret society, goes to FDR and says, hey, look at this. I mean, this tells the story of who we are and what we're doing and what we should be doing in the future.
Having discovered that the reverse of the Great Seal had never been used, Wallace suggested to Roosevelt that they put it on a coin. Then Roosevelt decided instead that both sides of the Great Seal should be printed on the $1 bill.
It's interesting that President Roosevelt personally approved the design. Roosevelt often had influence on the final design of projects, whether money or stamps or architecture, and in this case he reviewed the final version and had an input and made some small revisions.
Are the conspiracy theorists right in this instance about the power of the Masons?
Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Henry Wallace are two of the most prominent Masons that have been members in the United States. Roosevelt is one of our 14 presidents that were members of the Masonic fraternity.
You really do have what you